Welcome everyone. I'm excited to kick off today's presentation on Alol. This is the first slide, so I just want to warmly welcome you all and give a quick overview. Today, we'll explore what All means, its traditional significance, and how it applies to distribution bases. We'll also look at the 7 common bases of distribution, specifically focusing on which of these are subject to All. So, let's get started and dive into this interesting topic together. Let's take a closer look at this slide. Here, we're exploring how the distribution of an estate is calculated based on certain rules. The table shows different family members and their respective shares. For example, the husband is allocated half or a half of the estate, which corresponds to 3 parts. Similarly, the mother is assigned 1/3 or 1/3 with a value of 2 parts. The full sister gets half or a half with 3 parts assigned to her. Moving to the second set of numbers, we see the same family members, but with different values. The husband remains at 3 parts, but the full sisters now share 2/3 or 2/3, totaling 4 parts. The key concept here is that the entire estate, which is 6, is divided based on these proportions. The basis for this distribution, the all of 6, is derived from other related figures, specifically 7, 8, 9, or 10, which are different possible bases to consider. The main point to remember is that these proportions are flexible and depend on the specific circumstances, but they always relate back to this core basis, here, the 6. By understanding these examples, we can see how the distribution works in practice, applying the rules consistently to ensure fair division according to Islamic inheritance principles. Let's take a closer look at this family tree diagram. On the first table, we see that I share 10 parts with my husband, which is divided into different fractions representing our shared relatives. For instance, I share half of my paternal half-sister with him, which is shown as one of the key relationships. We also see that I share a quarter, or 2 parts, with my maternal half-sister. Additionally, there's a smaller part, 1/6, representing my grandmother. Moving to the second table, the relationships expand a bit. I share 9 parts overall, again with my husband, but now also with my mother, my full sister, and other half-siblings. Notably, I share half of my full sister with my husband, which signifies a close family connection. I also share smaller parts with my mother, paternal and maternal half-sisters. The key point here is how these fractions illustrate the degree of genetic relatedness among family members. The larger the share, like the a half, the closer the relationship, whereas smaller fractions, like 1/6, indicate more distant relatives. Understanding these relationships helps us see how familial connections are quantified and how they relate to concepts of inheritance, shared traits, and family dynamics. Connecting this to our overall theme of continuous learning, it emphasizes the importance of understanding complex relationships to better appreciate our own family structures and their influence on us. Let's take a closer look at this distribution table. Here, we see the different relatives and the portions assigned to each. For example, the wife is allocated a quarter or a quarter of the estate, which is straightforward. Moving on, the paternal half-sister is assigned 2/3 or 2/3, and the maternal half-sister gets 1/3 or 1/3. These fractions reflect their respective shares based on their relationship. Now, in the second table, the husband receives a quarter, just like the wife. The mother gets a 1/6, and the father also gets a 1/6 plus an additional amount, indicated as a plus A. The daughter is allocated half of the estate, which is quite significant. It's important to note that all these shares are based on the total of 12, which is our common denominator here. The key point is that the entire estate is divided according to these fractions, which are derived from Islamic inheritance laws. Also, the note mentions that the distribution for the all of 12 as a basis can be either of 13, 15, or 17. This means the same principles can be applied to different total shares, adjusting the fractions accordingly. The main takeaway from this slide is understanding how these shares are calculated and how they relate to the overall estate. These examples help illustrate the application of the rules in real scenarios, connecting the theory to practice in estate distribution. All right, let's take a closer look at this slide. On the left, we see a sequence of fractions and relationships, which might seem a bit complex at first glance. But what we're really doing here is breaking down family relationships and how they connect through shared genetics or familial ties. For instance, the a quarter or quarter relationship indicates a certain degree of shared genetics, like with a wife, who is listed here with a value of 3. Moving on, the or sixth relationship relates to a mother, with a value of 2, which could represent a different level of genetic sharing or familial connection. Then we see the 2/3 or 2/3, which is quite significant, associated with a second paternal half-sister, with a value of 8. This suggests a closer relationship, perhaps half-siblings sharing a substantial part of their genetic makeup. Similarly, the 1/3 or 1/3 relates to a maternal half-sister, with a value of 4, indicating yet another form of familial connection. The key takeaway here is understanding how these fractional relationships help us quantify and visualize the different levels of kinship and shared genetics within a family. Recognizing these values and their significance is essential for our overall theme of continuous learning and developing a deeper understanding of complex relationships. Now let's look at how the distribution works based on the total amount of 24. As you can see, we've broken down the shares for each family member. The wife gets, which is 3 units, the mother receives, totaling 4 units. The father also gets plus an additional A, making it 4 units as well. The 2 daughters together share 2/3, which sums up to 16 units. The key point here is that the total distribution is based on the amount of 27, which we see at the top, but the actual basis of distribution is 24, the total available amount. This means that all these shares are proportionally calculated from 24, not the total 27. It's important to highlight that this distribution is only subject to A, which is a concept indicating the basis, or the total of 24, applied once. So, no matter how many parts or shares there are, the total basis remains fixed at 24, and each share is a proportion of that. Understanding this helps us see how distribution works in practice. It's all about proportional division based on a fixed basis, and that basis is used only once to determine everyone's share. This concept ensures fairness and clarity in distribution, which ties back to our overall theme of equitable resource sharing.